You ready?
I think so.
You ready?
Let's do it.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Talk the Talk, RTR-FM's weekly show about linguistics, the science of language. For the next hour, we're going to be bringing you language news, language and the law, and some great music. Maybe we'll even hear from you. My name's Daniel Midgley. I'm here with Ben Ainsley.
Good morning.
And Kylie Sturgis.
G'day, everyone.
On this episode, we're talking about trademark law. Does that sound abstruse enough for you? What if it involves a potentially offensive racial term? Should this kind of thing be allowed to be trademarked? We're going to be talking to an expert on this episode of Talk the Talk.
It's great to be back.
I feel good in this chair.
I think it's about dang time we get into what's been going on in the world of linguistics in the 4 weeks gone past.
Oh, wow.
There's just too much, so we're going to have to focus on the highlights.
Okay.
This one was the most interesting to me, the Bixby letter. Ben, you've heard of the Bixby letter. Tell me all about it.
Oh, geez, Daniel. I'm just so glad that you have asked about the Bixby letter. Bixby was a dandy in the Manchurian city of Manchester. And in this city, Bixby would write missives to the various men, women, and animals that he had romantic liaisons with. And the Bixby letter, the most famous one, because of course any true Bixby fan would know that there is in fact a body of work by Bixby and many letters. The most famous one, though, Daniel, was actually sent to an oxen that he felt he had a most profound spiritual connection to. The oxen's name, Kylie, I'm not done. The oxen's
Just
name
let him go.
Was Frankfurt. And Frankfurt, purportedly, nuzzled gently at the Bixby's left armpit.
No, that's not the Bixby letter.
Okay.
How much caffeine did you have? Is it still in your system?
We must be talking about a different Bixby letter, and it's weird to me that there's 2 really well-known ones. What one are you guys talking about?
Kylie, would you take it, please?
Clearly, we're talking about the Bixby letter in connection with saving Matt Damon.
Kind of.
Yeah.
What?
Well,
Have you ever seen or heard of Saving Private Ryan?
Saving Private Ryan, only one of the seminal war films and one of Steven Spielberg's best films. No, I haven't. I've watched that film a lot.
Okay, good. Yeah. Then you're familiar with the idea of this letter being sent saying, there's this situation where loss of your 5 sons in war, and this particular real letter was sent to Lydia Bixby, and it was purported to be sent to her by, at the time, Abraham Lincoln.
Right.
And people go, wow, that's an amazing thing.
So I kind of have this narrative in my head, right? The narrative goes that Abraham Lincoln, when being informed that this one woman had lost 4 or 5 of her sons, kind of went, we can't just send out like 4 separate letters to this poor lady. Give it to me. I'm like, she's given so much to this nation. I'm going to handwrite this letter from the president to her, and that's the Bixby letter.
Yeah, either him or John Hay, who was Abraham Lincoln's secretary at the time.
Okay.
However, time has moved on, and there's now an opportunity for people to find out actually who wrote the letter, thanks to some cutting-edge technology, and people at the University of Manchester and Aston University in the UK.
Can I just acknowledge for a second that through absolute sheer coincidence, I pulled a city name out of my arse before, and it was Manchester.
Whoa, this is one of those Kennedy Lincoln things.
That's weird. Carry on.
Author Joe Nickell is somebody who's tried to settle this. He did, a long time ago, a good forensic analysis of this, and he came down on the side of Lincoln.
Right, so what we're talking about is, let's compare the letter to this huge extant body of work by various people and see if it forensically links up.
And Joe Nickell, I have met Joe Nickell. I even have one of his calling cards. If you ever meet Joe Nickell, he will give you a wooden nickel with his with his contact details. I'll bring it in one of these days and show it to you all.
That's cool.
You've been had by Ace Ventura.
And the reason why he came down on the side of Lincoln is that, remember, John Hay was a very young man while Lincoln was president, and so they were kind of a generation apart. And so they used language a little differently. Lincoln was really steeped in the whole Elizabethan Shakespearean tradition.
Right.
He used phrases like, instead of saying, "If I am mistaken, then," he didn't say that. He would say, "Should I be mistaken, then."
Right,
the whole
okay.
should thing.
So it's got a real, almost to our ear, really high theatric kind of vibe.
And in other ways, it's different too. Like, for example, John Hay, in his writings, used present perfect a lot, like "I have done" or "I have been," whereas Lincoln just doesn't.
Yeah, right.
Okay. All right. So that's where the research sat until recently, when Jack Grieve and a team from the University of Manchester
And Aston University in the UK, teaming up,
decided to try to do a forensic look at this using computational techniques. Now, usually what you do is you compile a list of all the words and you look at, say, my top 10 words versus your top 10 words.
Right.
Because they'll be different.
Yeah.
And it's not the kind of thing you can really change. The other thing that you could do is you could look at all the singletons.
All the ones that I use incredibly infrequently.
Yeah, all the ones that just appear once.
Yeah, right.
My list of singletons will be different from your list of singletons. But those techniques are no good when a text is very short. Remember, the Bixby letter it's only 139 words long.
wow.
Sounds like Abe Lincoln was a bit of a short talker anyway.
Well, when you have a very small text, you have to use special techniques. And this team developed one. They call it n-gram tracing. So here's what you do. You have to look at n-grams. An n-gram is a series of n words in a row. So how are you is a 3-gram.
Right.
You just take a look at all the n-grams in the unknown text and just tot them up in a big list. And then you look and see if it matches the kind of n-grams that appear in Lincoln's writing and all the ones that occur in Hay's writing.
So what you're talking about is idiosyncratic sort of turns of phrase, essentially, like the way different words tend to get used in conjunction with each other, and that's going to be... Are we talking like fingerprint level of idiosyncrasy here? Like every single person, if we got everyone in the world to sit down and write like 1,000 words, we would be able to ping each and every one of them.
People do have distinct patterns. I mean, they got
fascinating.
They got down not just to the word level, but to the actual letter level.
Whoa.
Because people show different patterns that way too. Or at least you can match up someone's work. And the reason we know you can match up someone's work is because they used something called leave one out testing. So you get all of Hay's stuff, all of Lincoln's stuff, you leave one out, and then you see, okay, can you pick who this belongs to? And train on all the rest. And then do it again, and do it again, and do it again until you've done every single one. And sure enough, when we knew something was from Lincoln, their system picked it as Lincoln's. And when we knew it was from Hay, their system picked it as Hay.
So, then, tell us, who wrote the Bixby letter?
It's Hay!
Oh!
Yes, it matched up with Hay. The pattern of matching got better the more information they included. So they're reasonably certain, in fact, perhaps even unreasonably certain, it's Hay that wrote the Bixby letter.
So my idea that it was the president going, yeah, you deal with this one. I just can't. No, you go.
I can't even.
No.
In particular, he used, the Bixby letter uses words that only Hay uses, like alter, anguish, beguile, costly, and heavenly.
Oh.
Wow.
So, according to this technique, it's Hay.
Well, thankfully, time has passed on long enough that Mrs. Bixby no longer has to realise, oh, damn, the president didn't give enough.
The statute of limitations is well and truly elapsed on that one.
Dang.
Still, it's really cool that we can use computational techniques even on very short texts, which is a real problem for forensic linguistics.
And I hear that Jack the Ripper's letters are up next.
That's what they're going to do.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Because, short texts. Start analysing. A couple of suspects out there.
What else could we do? Ransom
It was
notes?
Alan Moore all along.
Good to know.
Good to know. Shall we take a track?
Yeah, let's listen to Thievery Corporation with Letter to the Editor on RTR-FM 92.1.
And if you are just joining us on this week's episode of Talk the Talk, we're kind of taking a little bit of a deep dive into where the law and propriety kind of come face to face. Is that how you describe the situation with the Slants?
There's a lot of stuff that meets here. We've got language and law and trademark and rights and platforms. It just all comes out in this one area.
So, before we go too far, I'll catch the listeners up on the sort of like the state of play of the situation. Coming out of the west coast of the US is a band called the Slants, comprised of Asian American individuals.
They describe their sound as Chinatown dance rock.
Oh, that sounds like fun.
I think they sound kind of Depeche Mode-y, and I like that very much.
Cool.
And gave themselves, I think, quite what's the word I'm looking for?
Confronting?
Quite confrontingly, deliberately called themselves a racial epithet, which can be horrifically insulting if used as a racial epithet, which is the Slants.
Yeah, calling somebody a slant's pretty unpleasant, but they've taken it as a way of reclaiming the term.
Okay.
But they tried to trademark their name, and the US Patent and Trademark Office said no.
Knocked it back.
Because it is offensive.
And disparagement is one of the reasons why you can't trademark something. Which is kind of weird because we already know that there is a certain football team with the R name in the States.
I was wondering about that.
They've got a trademark, and they don't want to let go of their trademark, and they've been under pressure to get rid of it.
Dare I say that when the trademark for the Washington R-skins was handed out, it was at a time when the people doing that checking at the trademark office were probably, I would say, on the whole, a lot less socially woke than members might be these days. And the person who rubber stamped it didn't think twice.
Yeah.
They literally would have gone, "Pakut!"
Yeah, they've always been that. We know that team. Yeah.
And so when Mr. Tam and his band were like, yeah, but we want to trademark this, you might think that it was a little bit more woke to knock it back, but Simon Tam has said, wait a minute, this is a label that applies to us. So what happens?
I get to use this word. This is my word.
Well, that's where it was.
Yes.
When we talked to Simon, I think maybe 4 years ago.
Big time.
Wow.
It went to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Wow.
Highest court of review.
They are determined.
And they won 8-0.
Boom. Ain't nothing.
Wow.
That's not a win. That's a landslide.
What's the ramifications of this, though?
Well, I was curious about the ramifications of this myself, and there's no better person to talk to than Simon Tam of the Slants, so I got him on the phone. First of all, I congratulated him on winning his court case.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it definitely feels like a relief, and I'm so glad that it's over now.
Now, you can now trademark your name, the name of your band, the Slants. What does that mean? What can you now do that you couldn't do before?
Well, to be clear, we still have to go through a few more steps. Even after the court, what happens is the trademark office has to publish it for opposition. There has to be a time period where people can review it, possibly object to it being registered as a trademark, and that sort of thing. So, assuming that all of that goes through just fine, what it means at the end of the day is that we get a registered trademark. And for the most part, it's more symbolic than anything. I mean, certainly it'll allow us to protect our name and our brand in commerce. It'll prevent other people from using our goodwill or using our name and kind of deceiving fans with it. But more importantly, what it means is that an outdated bit of law that was in the government's books that was allowing the U.S. government to deny people rights based on their race, sexual orientation, and gender is now off the books. We were able to revoke that law and inherently protect one of our the most important constitutional rights in this country, which is freedom of speech.
Okay, so there is another side, though, and that is that it seems that now other groups will be able to tighten their grip a little bit on trademark names that are considered offensive. And I'm thinking in particular of the football team, the Redskins. I know you guys aren't fans of the Redskins name and what they're doing, and yet here we are. What are your feels on that?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think we have to understand that one of the best ways to protect civil rights in this country is protecting individual liberties. And that means protecting the First Amendment, which means that inadvertently there will be sometimes people who might take advantage of that and abuse freedom of speech. But we shouldn't allow that kind of fear to lock us into putting in laws of censorship that are disproportionately used against marginalized communities, which is what has been happening for the last 70 years. I think people have to realize that the worst encounters against racism in this country for people of color are not racial slurs. Racial slurs are just a symptom of a deeper, more serious epidemic of systemic and institutionalized racism. So if people truly care about fighting racism, they need to move beyond uncomfortable conversations about things like words and actually move into things like systems and culture.
I get that, and yet could this decision not be used as a way of propping up speech that vilifies marginalized or minority communities?
Not really, because in order to get a registered trademark, you have to have a legitimate business practice to begin with. There's only very few people who want to try and establish a business using something like a racial slur or something that means women and market that, because you have to include your own personal contact information, you have to pay a bunch of fees and go through this long process in order to make that happen. Most people, frankly, aren't going to do that based on a whim. And for those that are willing to go through the steps, well, generally speaking, they're going to be racist or sexist regardless if they have a trademark registration or not. They're going to try and do those kinds of activities in the market. So this doesn't necessarily empower them or enable them because this isn't government speech. Trademarks always have and always will be private speech. You know, people get to determine the name of their business and they can use it whether they have a trademark registration or not. So this part doesn't necessarily change that at all. I think there's this misconception that people assume because they can now get an offensive trademark that all of a sudden it, empowers them, or if it all of a sudden makes their mark stronger. But the reality is that that's not the case. There's no government support of the message behind the Washington football team any more than there is government support over the use of Coca-Cola's motto or Pepsi's logo.
I guess the law doesn't distinguish between someone who's trying to reclaim a racial label as their own and say, this is mine, and somebody who wants to use a racial label to vilify.
That's correct. And it's kind of would be impossible, because if they did, then they most definitely would have to consider the identity of the person who is applying for that mark. But the problem is trademarks are transferable. Like I could sell the name of the band, the Slants, to somebody else, perhaps somebody who has a different purpose, or perhaps somebody who's not Asian at all. And so then what would happen in that instance? Would the government cancel the mark? Would they try and lock it in, say, only Asians are allowed to own this trademark registration? It becomes much more complex when you start thinking about how the government regulates based on the identity or the intention of the applicant.
Simon Tam from the Slants.
He has a really interesting point sort of halfway through that little bracket of your discussion. He kind of went, look, the racial epithets are not the pointy end of racism, right? The pointy end of racism is structural inequality and cultural inequality. And if we want to address that, we need to be able to see it. So this noise around my name, this is not the relevant discussion.
Do you think it's making progress? Do you think we didn't have to deal with it because it was so pervasive? And now we finally are having to deal with it.
Possibly.
If you want to be a racist, you can be a racist, but you got to work at it a little harder than you used to have to.
It's interesting, isn't it? I would probably take the approach that at the moment in the States, the drop they have on us, being Australians, is that we're still really good at keeping all of our racism and sexism really low-key for the most part, I find. He says in a position of absolute privilege, right? But Australian society is incredibly good at not lancing that boil and not having it come to be a boil, just have this kind of this privilege exercise through every strata of our supposedly
so
egalitarian
many excuses.
Oh man.
And if you ever bring it up, then people, white people especially, will fight you on it and say, I'm not privileged, what are you talking about? I have it tough like everybody else.
Now in the States at the moment, the one edge I think they have on us as a society is that shit is blowing up, right? Like, so that boil is coming to a head whether they like it or not. And so possibly there's an opportunity there, an opportunity that we're not having as an option for us here in Australia, because we're still comfortable, we're not challenged, and none of our privilege is being taken away by anyone. But that is definitely happening in the States. So maybe there's movement there. I don't know.
Well, let's have a track, and then we'll have the other half of our discussion with Simon Tam. I was thinking we could try one of their tracks.
Yeah! Let's listen to the Slants.
When I asked Simon what we should play, he suggested this one. It's called From the Heart on RTR-FM 92.1. The Slants with From the Heart on RTR-FM 92.1.
It's like very friendly, confronting music.
Very defiant. He describes it as kind of an open letter to the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office.
Wow.
Which I guess his open letter now gets to be like, nah.
I guess so.
Except his is a bit more rhythmical, yeah.
Well, perhaps we need to hear from him to find out what his next move is really going to be.
Well, in my discussion with Simon Tam, I mentioned that it seems that the U.S. Supreme Court decided to take a very expansive definition of free speech.
That's correct. And I would say it's actually nothing that revolutionary, because if you follow Supreme Court jurisprudence, they've been doing the same thing for the past 30, 40 years already. I mean, the reality is that if they're going to protect a group like Westboro Baptist Church and their right to protest at funerals of fallen soldiers, then the idea of protecting a football team name or band name isn't that far off, because at the end of the day, they realize that the cure for hate speech and hateful speech isn't going to be censorship, especially by the government. The actual solution to these kind of problems have to be in the marketplace and have to come from more speech, more nuanced speech, and that with that's more effective in the so-called marketplace of ideas.
In a pre-Trump world, I would have agreed with you, but I'm not sure, because I don't always feel, and I haven't always observed that good speech drowns out bad speech. I think that there's an awful lot of bad speech out there, and it actually drowns out good speech. And I'm kind of on two minds about this, because I'm for freedom of speech, and you can't have the government telling people what to say. Like, if I'm happy for an Obama to tell me what I can say, then I better be happy for a Trump to tell me what to say, and I'm not. So there's that.
Sure.
But
I think that it's totally understandable, but you have to look at things in like the long-range strategy of justice. And I think that even with the Trumps in the world, that we are moving towards a more equitable society, that justice and will prevail, even though there's some temporary setbacks on things. That ultimately, even with, say, Trump being empowered to do the things that he does and empowering other people with fascist tendencies, it's also inspiring a new wave of people discovering their civic engagement and kind of awakening their own social consciousness. And so he's inadvertently spurring more people to consider things that otherwise would have been living mundane lives and living in ignorance of these critical issues.
I get that. And yet I can also see how when there's awful speech, when anything's allowed, then it really does drive out good speech. It makes people who belong to marginalized communities shut up and check out because they just don't want to face that all the time. What do you think about this?
Well, I think it just kind of depends. I mean, in terms of like our society in the U.S., we know that free speech isn't absolute. Hate speech is not protected here in the U.S. Like, you can't issue out threats of violence or imminent violence. Contrary to what people think, the Supreme Court decision does not actually allow hate speech. All it did was allow the trademark registrations to exist as personal views rather than government-endorsed views. So we haven't exactly moved the needle to what a lot of people advocate as or call a pure speech model, where all speech is pure and therefore should be protected. That being said, I think that again, when you look at those kinds of things, we're really only looking at the symptoms of larger issues. So, say if this were like a tree, hateful things are really only like the branches and leaves. We have to look at systemic issues, which are more like the roots. We have to look at culture. We have to look at institutions. As a member of the marginalized community and someone who's faced generations of racism throughout my family, our biggest challenges weren't being shouted down by other people. It was the lack of a platform, the lack of protection for our own speech. So there wasn't equal footing there. And that's what I think people oftentimes forget, that when you look at the civil rights movement, when you look at the backlash against locking people of Japanese ancestry into concentration camps here in the U.S. or other things, it wasn't the lack of speech, it was the lack of a platform and the lack of recognition of our rights to speak on those issues. that drove people away or tried to shut us down.
And so I guess by having your band name, the Slants, sort of in people's face, it's like, whoa, this is kind of confronting. I guess we're in a space now where we're confronting these issues of representation and platform.
I mean, I think it's one way. I would say this is not the only way. Changing the society is extremely complex and nuanced, and so it's going to require many different strategies. Not everybody agrees with us, and that reappropriation is like this effective way of changing society. But my view is that if it empowers a few people to be proud of their heritage rather than dissociate it with shame, then it's worth it, and it's going to do some really great things.
Simon Tam of the Slants, talking trademark law and the battle for his band's name.
I find freedom of speech really tricky. It's one of the concepts that's really important in like the healthy function of a society that I feel I'm on the least stable ground about. Some days I feel like I'm just this like true believer, all free speech all the time kind of mindset, and then at other times I feel like I'm just like, you can't say that word and you can't say that word and none of you can say this word. And so I don't know.
I'm wondering if anybody else is listening to this or has been following the case and is now thinking about their own band names or their own shop names or their own comic and maybe going to start making moves in that direction in order to legitimise it. There may be groups out there who thought to themselves, okay, I want to fight for this name. There's no precedence. Now there's a precedence.
Yeah.
This has won.
The disparagement clause is gone.
Overwhelmingly as well.
Yeah.
So now we've got something that can be put on the table and say, right, let's see if we can go in this direction.
I've got a business. I'm going to start, you guys. It's going to sell sort of gumnut flavored art, like made by sort of local artisanal handmade gumnut art. I'm going to call the store Honkies.
Well, I was thinking of opening a store that sells nothing but crackers. Guess what I'm going to call it?
Answers on the RTRFM Talk the Talk Facebook page. Yeah.
I'm actually less concerned about people starting new stores, and I'm actually more concerned about existing
The Redskins.
gross trademark names. They're not going anywhere now.
Yes,
they're kind of locked in. There's absolutely no reason to get rid of them, except for public pressure.
Well, I was about to say, so now what we're essentially doing is it's pretty ironic that, or it's pretty intuitive that this happened in America. We're just, hey, free market, can you sort this problem out for us?
Vote with the feet. Yeah.
But we've seen lots of cases of free market failure. The entire Trump presidency is a free market failure. The worst ideas won.
Yes, absolutely. Well, good. I'm depressed. Let's take a track.
Okay, this one, I thought that maybe we could try listening to another band that's been having some legal trouble for the same reasons, that their name was deemed lewd or offensive. This is a Seattle band, Thunder Pussy, with their track Velvet Noose on RTRFM 92.1.
So, Daniel.
Yes, Ben.
Kylie.
Yes.
I've brought you in here today to talk to you about a very serious matter that I've been considering for some time.
Oh, no. What is it, Ben?
It's Word of the Week.
Our word of the week this week is somewhat related. The word is...
Wait, is it the phrase somewhat related?
No.
Okay.
Not literally. It's a compound word. The word is no platforming.
No platforming.
No hyphen platforming.
No hyphen platforming.
Well, it needs a hyphen, otherwise it would be noplet forming.
Okay.
Noplet forming.
Or deplatforming. Which one have you heard more?
I've heard neither of them.
Okay.
I think no platforming sounds better than deplatforming. It sounds like something you'd do if you fell off a bus. Oh, deplatformed right off the bus.
Please do not deplatform.
I feel like deplatforming is the process by which disco addicts got like ripped out of the bosom of disco institutions. Like, we're deplatforming you, and then off come the shoes.
Off of the shoes.
Like an ab fab where they just fall down a bunch of stairs in their high heels.
Well, what is it? It's rescinding an invitation to speak. There was a high-profile no platforming this week with Richard Dawkins,
a.k.a. the only human being Ben is more annoyed by than the game Scrabble.
Oh, really? Wow.
So what is it?
Dawkins.
Like Dawkins,
Yep.
bread twisty ties,
Yeah.
Scrabble.
Yep.
And Kylie eating a lot of bagels.
And anyone claiming that things are sandwiches when they're clearly not sandwiches.
Yeah.
That's the hierarchy. But yeah, look, to be frank, right up the top is world's most annoying, douchey, smart guy, Dawkins.
I don't know why, but I think I'll just always be grateful to him for kickstarting the atheist revolution.
You don't have to like everyone for everything.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly right.
That's exactly.
Anyway, so he's been deplatformed.
So, Kylie, do you want to give us some background here? Because you might know more about the KPFA no platforming.
Well, I mostly read about it on a blog called Fringular, which is written by P.Z. Myers. And Dawkins has written a new book, which I've checked out recently. Haven't bought it yet, but I think I might do, called Science and the Soul, Selected Writings of a Passionate Rationalist. Yeah, that sounds okay, sure.
Yeah.
And KPFA, a radio station in Berkeley, said that they were rescinding an offer to have him speak because they said that some of the things he said has offended and hurt. They support free speech, but not abusive speech. And P.Z. Myers has written that Dawkins is free to debate and criticise ideas. Conferences have the right to refuse. He doesn't obligate every entity on a planet to host him on demand.
That's true.
I thought, yep, that's great. And someone else in the comments immediately in that blog post, which we'll post a link to on our social media, Chuck Stanley added something which I also agreed with. Conferences have the right to use resources however they want. There's a scarcity out there. For example, we're going to be speaking at the festival that's happening in Perth at the end of the month, the Disrupted Festival. And, they only have a certain amount of space and time and resources in order to have certain speakers there. Maybe they would have loved to have X
about
and
that,
Y,
Kylie,
talk about things.
Apparently it can only be me and Daniel.
Oh.
Awkward.
I'll be in the audience muttering about free speech, okay? But yeah, they have the right to say, yeah, we'll have X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, sure.
Nobody has to provide anybody resources to exercise free speech. You can get your own resources. You can, if you can't be on the radio station, go somewhere else.
Well, the dude did just
elsewhere.
publish a book.
Yeah, exactly.
In this particular instance, because we never mentioned it, what actual abusive speech had he committed in his book?
It was claimed that he was being abusive speech towards people from the Islamic religion.
Okay, now, Richard Dawkins wrote an open letter about this, challenging KPFA to find any abusive speech against Muslims. He has challenged religion, but he's very careful, at least he says, to distinguish criticizing ideas from criticizing people. And in fact, he makes the mention of the fact that Muslims are the ones that are hurt a lot by Islamism. He makes a distinction between Islamism and Islam. I got to say, in light of his open letter, I think KPFA made the wrong call.
If what he's saying holds water,
if what he's saying
which
is true,
I fully can't judge because I haven't read any of this stuff. But the point that other kind of militant atheists have made on this, which is that you, unfortunately, because there is a blurring of the lines between Islam, Muslims, Islamism, Islamic extremism, there's this real grey area nebulousness here. It can be very easy to be perceived to be hating on a group of people when what you're hating on is a set of ideas.
I've criticized religion a lot, but I do try to keep it.
What?
I know. But I've also had to decide if that was the most helpful thing I could be doing.
Right.
Sometimes I say there are two things I don't like, religion and discrimination. And sometimes I have to ask myself, by criticizing a religion, am I maybe playing into perceived discrimination? And you just have to watch yourself so carefully. Let's get wordy.
Okay.
Disinvite or uninvite?
Ooh. I see, for me, to use it, uninvite.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've been invited and then suddenly I'm uninvited from the party rather than
see.
I am disinvited from the party.
Disinvited sounds like a weird, like a major domo would let someone know that for this evening's proceedings, I'm sorry, sir, you have been disinvited at the behest of Master so-and-so.
Good day, sir. I said good day.
For you shot his prized hound in today's fox hunt.
Oops. Yeah, I expect the being shown the door for that one here.
Uninvited could mean a couple of things because, Richard Dawkins has been uninvited from the thing, but then I'm also uninvited. I was never invited in the first place.
That was the thing as well. I mean, can you? Does it have to be known that you were invited and then it was rescinded?
See,
Whereas disinvited is explicitly rescinded.
Yeah.
I don't know, my brain says that not invited and uninvited are not synonymous.
That is interesting because non and un. To me feels like a reversal of something. Yes, very much.
Yeah.
So, for example, you could say, I'm a non-smoker, which means I don't smoke. I'm an unsmoker? What does that mean?
Ew.
Yeah, you can smoke cigarettes or you can not smoke cigarettes. That's the non.
Yeah.
But you can't unsmoke a cigarette. What would that be?
Oh my god! Yeah.
Oh, yuck.
Right?
And the cigarette just gets longer and ashifies.
You can't unsmoke a cigarette. Although
You can't
can
unring
say,
a bell.
You can say the cigarette lay unsmoked on the table. Right? In which case, kind of means not just a reversal of process,
that's true.
but a reversal of expectation. Hey, this laundry is unfolded. Like I expected it to be folded, right?
Or in my house's case, hey, this laundry is folded.
How did that happen?
So un is kind of like a reversal, but dis is like an explicit reversal.
Right. Dis is like, well, a diss.
A diss.
Yeah, it's dissing.
Merriam-Webster on their blog point out that both disinvite and uninvite have a long and honorable history. They kind of grew up side by side.
A long, shady history.
Maybe. Un is from Old English, dis is from Latin, and dis usually likes to stick to Latin words.
Oh, okay. I don't know if this is our parlance from the information age, but disconnected definitely connotes an idea of removal of connection.
Very much.
Whereas unconnected simply means, oh, that's strange, they never finished that
Yeah,
bridge.
completely off topic. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think if you want to say that someone got not invited anymore, if you say that an invitation was rescinded, then and you wanted to be nice about it, you could say that they were uninvited.
Right.
But if you want to really put down the hammer, you could say they were disinvited.
I like it. Okay, cool. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
So now we've learned something about un and dis.
Yeah.
Dawkins got dissed.
And und.
And und.
I'm absolutely positive that there'll be other events and other venues that he'll be invited to in the future.
Something tells me he's not going away.
And so, if anyone's sad about this or, I'm certain he won't be
He'll be
turning
popping up
eventually.
somewhere.
He'll be popping up somewhere, yeah.
Thanks, you guys.
Well, now that I've spent the better part of that bracket just ragging on Dawkins, like the coward from the tiny radio station in Perth, Western Australia I am, shall we take a track?
Let's hear one from Timothy Nelson and the Infidels. This is Speak the Truth in Love on RTR FM 92.1.
I got to get out of here. Kylie and Daniel, ready to field your questions. Hey, we've been talking about free speech a lot in today's episode. I'm willing to wager there's more than a handful of you out there who have something to say about this. You can get in touch with us in all of the usual ways.
Exercise your free speech across a number of platforms.
100%. You can engage yourself heartily with our online community on the Talk to Talk Facebook page.
There's Twitter, where we are at TalkRTR.
And there's the phone number, 9260-9210. Give us a ring.
And we're also on Talk the Talk at rtrfm.com.au.
For your longer free speech missives.
And don't forget, if you want to check out any of the additional material, we've always got the Patreon page, and you can find the links to everything we've discussed in the show notes.
Toodaloo.
Timothy Nelson and the Infidels with Speak the Truth in Love, because it's all about the love here at RTR FM. We hope to share the love in lots and lots of ways. And you're here with Daniel on Talk the Talk, but I'm not here alone. I've got Kylie.
G'day.
And we've got someone actually very special here. It's Mr. Peter Barr.
Good morning. My
Just.
favourite science of language experts.
We wanted you here for a couple of reasons. Number one, because, this is your last day at the old RTR.
It is true.
Is it
Absolutely.
an emotional moment? Is it?
It's starting to feel that way, yeah. It was extraordinarily emotional a couple of years ago at the end of 2014, because that was the end of my run on breakfast here, and that's the space and the place where, you get heard and you get known, and so that was very emotional. A lot of love in the room there. This, for the last couple of years, I've been a grunt worker, in the... if that's a thing.
We're not going to throw confetti at you, by the way.
No, that's right, but...
You've
Yeah.
been helping make the magic happen. For all of those people who might be aware, the content on the mag, you've been the guiding force behind that. So whenever you hear us do interviews on interesting things, it's been Peter who's been our mentor and aid in that regard.
And not only that, but Peter has had an enormous impact on Talk the Talk. I remember...
I'm not convinced.
I remember when this was a 7-minute gig and I would come in on Tuesdays and I would sort of bounce things off of you so I could be funny, because that helped.
Like erasers.
Yes. And you had the idea for making this into a whole hour gig. What in the world?
Not everything people talk about on radio is interesting. Not everything people talk about on the radio has a long lifespan. And able to be on there for a long time. Linguistics, I always thought did. There was a fellow before you, Professor Alan Dench, who used to also speak linguistics and the science of language on RTR-FM. He was amazing. You came along when he couldn't and are amazing and continue to be so. You make the language come alive and you make it a really intriguing topic, and that's why I thought there was a whole scope of stuff to talk about over an extended period.
Well, I would say that Talk the Talk is, I don't know, would you say one of the major linguistics podcasts?
Certainly in Australia, there's not many of them out there, and what really encourages me is seeing so many new podcasts popping up and saying, hey, you're a podcast, hey, I listen to you. I'm thinking of doing it. Yes, you should.
Please.
You should go out and make your own podcast. If it's on linguistics, on another subject, give it a shot.
We like to talk about stuff with you sometimes, and here's a bit from an interview that we had once on an episode about min talks.
You know what I hate? I absolutely despise the phrase cool bananas.
I hate that too, but that's because I knew somebody who said it and I didn't like them. Could that be it?
I don't know that person, so I'll...
No, I'm sure you do. He's about this tall. And
right?
Yeah.
Hair?
Yeah, he's got absolutely no nose.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
How does he smell?
Terrible. I think we better stop. That was one of my highlights. I got to pull out that terrible joke.
Yeah, totally.
No.
Mintox, one of my favourite words.
We also thought about how to alphabetize music. Should it be Bush Kate or Kate Bush?
Oh yes, and I maintain.
You do still?
Yes. This is something though that I've always enjoyed about Talk the Talk is that I've always had my preconceived ideas about grammar and language, and I got those from the learning of them, right? But they were taught to me in a certain way, and you've attempted to open my ears over the years.
Haven't made it.
As to how language and grammar and all those rules can evolve and change.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. This is doing my heart good.
Oh yeah, I'm not absolutely on board with this idea, but I understand the concept.
You don't have to like it.
That's right. Still I before E, except after C.
I think we're going to have to talk about this at some point.
All those cases when it's not.
Yeah.
W comes into it at some point. Well, thank you for your contribution to Talk the Talk.
You're welcome.
Quick one from Scott. Hey guys, great show as always. A friend of mine plays in the Dianas, also used to be in a band called, would you excuse me for a moment?
Okay.
Pussy Juice. They ended up changing their name because of all the unsolicited pics, etc. they'd get. In their own words, it's a dark web out there, Scott. Anyways, have a great day. We are having a great day. We hope you have a great day. And we hope that you'll come and see us at the Disrupted Festival this weekend. We're doing Talk the Talk live. So check our Facebook page for when that's going on.
Yep,
And
details of the guest and, all the opportunities for people to come down and see us for free doing it live.
The complete interview with Simon Tam will be available on our Patreon page, so check that out for all those things, along with lots of other goodies. Gosh, there's so much going on.
Yes, and Peter is leaving us.
Yep.
I'm off.
Thank you.
I'm off like a frog in a sock.
Well, thanks for your contribution, and thanks to everyone for listening, and until next time, keep talking.
This has been an RTR-FM podcast. RTR-FM is an independent community radio station that relies on listeners for financial support. You can subscribe online at rtrfm.com.au/subscribe.
Our theme song is by R Trees, and you can check out their music on rtrees.com and everywhere good music is sold.
We're on Twitter at TalkRTR. Send us an email, talkthetalk@rtrfm.com.au. And if you'd like to get lots of extra linguistic goodies, then like us on Facebook or check out our Patreon page. You can always find out whatever we're up to by heading to talkthetalkpodcast.com.